All right, yes, I can start. Hi, Reykjavik, City of Literature. My name's Ronnie Scott, and I am a writer from Melbourne. And this year I'm the resident as part of the program presented by UNESCO Cities of Literature in Reykjavik, which is open to writers from other cities of literature around the world. And so Melbourne is one of those cities as well. So I'm a novelist and a nonfiction writer, and I've been here in September of 2022, in case you're watching this in the far distant future. And it's been sort of an interesting time, I guess, because it's been a 3-week residency. This is the last day of that residency when I'm kind of reporting back. And what has happened is that in the first week, I was doing the final copy edits for a novel called Shirley, which comes out in February, so they just had to get done. And then the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to write fiction, doing bits of research, starting some stories, but mostly I've been sort of nudging along a nonfiction project that I had going before I came here, and sort of letting Reykjavik find its way into that project in different ways. So there's been lots of kind of little ideas started, sometimes started and stopped. A big thing finished, and then another big thing sort of kicked along, and that's been my 3 weeks in Gröndalshúss. Well, I'll have a go, but so I'll frame it by saying that I've been working on Shirley here for the first week of my residency. And actually, because it's still technically being written, so what will happen now is that it's being typeset. It's a public holiday in Australia today, and that was maybe going to delay the process of typesetting. Either it's been typeset already or it will have been by Monday. And then there's technically another round of editing after it's laid out on the page. And so for that reason, I have never spoken about Shirley in front of a camera, but I'll do so. So Shirley is a book that is about a protagonist in her early 30s. She's probably just turned 30 as the book has begun. I don't quite remember if we established that to the sort of numerical order, but she's the daughter of a celebrity who's a famous food host, or was a famous food host in the early 2000s. And fled the country in the wake of a scandalous photo. She had sort of a folly of a house called Shirley that she renovated again in inner city Melbourne, and the house was called Shirley. It's sort of a bit infamous because of this photo of her mother, in the middle of the night in sort of a beautiful lime green coat, or sort of a bluey green coat, the same blue as the cover of the book, covered in blood. And it was a photo that she never explained, she simply fled. And so there've always been kind of not terribly serious, but still kind of tacky, gossipy rumors around what happened to get the blood on this coat. And when we meet this woman, she has grown up, her mother left her in the care of one of her biggest fans, a man named Gerald. And she grew up sort of in this distant way from her mother. And she's created her own life. She lives in an apartment not very far from where she grew up. She's sort of got a quiet boyfriend. She's got a quiet job, nowhere near sort of food and fame. And she just likes being alone and kind of looking out over the city at night, and thinking her thoughts. It's a very sort of thinky, meditative book, but thinky and meditative in the wake of sort of a flashy scandal. But what happens at the start of the book is that a woman has moved in downstairs who, for various reasons, makes her rethink over the course of the novel her impression of the past, makes her rethink her relationship and her relationship to work and to being a daughter and the daughter of her mother. And I won't say any more about it than that, but that's Shirley. So the reason that I have come to Reykjavik, or really the reason that I applied for the City of Literature residency, which, by the way, any resident of a UNESCO City of Literature can do, and it seems to come up annually, so it's a good one to apply for, is that I am starting a third novel which is in some way about the history of visual art, and especially the way that visual art can cohere around communities, queer communities. This is something that I've been struggling with while I've been here writing, and also in the preceding sort of 6 months or however long it's been since I found out I got the residency, and I've been doing sort of preliminary writing towards it. I was interested in Reykjavik because it has sort of a relatively new street art and sort of postmodern art sort of scene, but is incredibly active, like so much of the writing and culture and music and other sort of, you know, creative production seems to be from outside of Reykjavik, and turns out to be when you're here. But also because there are artists such as Edo, who is influenced by comics and graphic narratives, and that's part of my background and part of what my intention is to do somehow in this novel, in writing about visual ideas. And there's sort of a big exhibition of his work and a big retrospective that I wanted to look at. And that combined with the fact that it's a very queer city in lots of ways, and that's sort of my fiction background. And because it's known as a huge literary city, and The Fish Can Sing by Halldór Laxness is a book that I adore, even though that's not about Reykjavik, it's about Iceland. And I actually have been thinking of that book more than I expected to on this residency, possibly because I went on a minibus that went past his house. Probably not a very special thing for anyone from Reykjavik to hear about, and yet was special to me. I think because the tone of that book is so different from what I thought I was doing in this third novel. I thought, like, both of my novels so far have been very sort of in one character's head, very sort of limited in time, limited in the number of characters, and I really want to do something that is sort of global and has several sort of bits of kind of scenes and set at slightly different times, and that's why I picked such a big topic as art and community. But being here, I've had the voice of that sort of young narrator in the Laxness book in my head, and sort of thought, well, what this idea probably needs is a character at its core, and it needs some kind of heart. And I don't know if that would end up being one particular segment of the novel that would have a similar, strangely Fish Can Sing-ish vantage on the world, or if it would be sort of an overarching shape or something. But so I've been playing with voice in a way that I didn't expect. I think that one of the things about a residency is that you have a plan going in, and there are obviously, you know, reasons to go to a particular place, things that you want to do while you're there, but the joy of it and the freedom and the privilege of it is that you end up making connections that you wouldn't have otherwise, by being in a new place, and by reading different things and sort of revisiting notes as well. So I brought my last couple of notebooks here, and so I've been going through those and typing those up sort of towards some nonfiction. So possibly the Icelandic flavor that ends up in the book will be different from the one that I thought it would have going in, or it will be more multifarious or something. But because it's so early in the project, it's quite hard to say how it will turn out, and I think that's as it should be. So this is my novel, The Adversary, my first novel, which came out in April 2020. And it's a novel that is about, at its center, two incredibly close friends, both young gay men. There's a protagonist and there's a best friend character. And at the start of the novel, this protagonist has been living with the best friend character in inner city Melbourne for a decent chunk of time. And it's getting to the point where, for various reasons, their friendship has to change. And the best friend character has always been a couple years older, but for other reasons as well, sort of seen as a sort of a model, a kind of intense model in this young man's life. And so in the scene that I'm going to read, the narrator is going to the Fitzroy pool with to meet up with that best friend. And also at the pool will be sort of all of the other main characters in the novel, some of whom he's meeting for the first time and some not. And it's just a few pages. All right. Before I'd let my membership to Brunswick Baths expire, a trainer had written on the whiteboard, "Remember, summer bodies are made in winter." It sounded like an old source trotted out by some Scandinavian detective, waiting for the lake to thaw and divulge its many bodies, creating a grisly wealth of summer overtime. Now though, climbing the bleachers at the Fitzroy pool, I saw it had a troubling meaning of a different kind. While I had been imagining this Scandinavian detective, other boys had been taking the advice as it was meant, girding themselves against sagginess and scrawniness and readying their bodies to greet the sunny world. Dan and Lachlan were already up there on the bleachers, perched on towels and gazing at me through their sunglassed eyes. Neither of their towels looked particularly beachy, but instead seemed lifted from some fancy hotel in the same thick royal green as their dressing gowns. I couldn't imagine how warm and lovely it would be to cover myself in these towels in dead of winter, nor how awful it would be to do this after exiting the water on a too hot, windless day, sweating and chlorined and sticky with sunscreen, squinting up at the gym complex that hulked over the pool. Like many aspects of Dan's life under Lachlan, the towels seemed like souvenirs from a weird other world. I nodded to them, saw a space on the tier below them, reasonably man-sized, and made my way towards it. To spread a beach towel on these bleachers was to perform an art. It required a keen eye for towel-shaped opportunity and no undue squeamishness for disadvantaging others. As I dropped my own scrappy blue-green spotted towel and kicked at it to spread it, the shape beside my towel rolled over and revealed itself, inscrutable behind its own pair of sunglasses, these ones dramatically large and bug-eyed. I paused mid-crouch. "Hey," I said. He paused too. "Hey," Chris L. said. I looked up at Dan and Lachlan. We'd already said hi to each other, but I was getting into the groove. "Hey," I said. "Hey," Lachlan said. My sunglasses were always cheap, and the last ones I'd bought had broken several months ago. There was nothing left to say and nothing left to do but take off my shoes and shirt so as to complete the sense of exposure. There were more gaps on the bleachers than it looked from below, but it was hard with noise, dense with sizzly bodies. I was lucky to have found a space at all. Only when the American was halfway up the bleachers did I realize my terrible mistake. As if to reintroduce the idea of his Americanness, he was holding two burger shapes in Lord of the Fries wrappers, obviously having left the bleachers in order to pick them up, his towel draped off his shoulders in a pretense of modesty. I held my hands up, palms out, sorry. "Hey, no friends in the towel game," he said. "This is Vivian," said Dan. "We've met," said Vivian. "Yeah," I said, rolling over and squinting up at Dan. "We are friends in the towel game." Dan was in one of his unimpressible moods. "What's the towel game?" he said, when it was entirely clear what we were talking about. "It's this," I said, and said, "Chris L., would you mind moving your towel?" Chris L. swooped his lenses over the bleachers. "Over the day, I don't mind at all," he said. I smiled at Dan. "Thank you, Chris L." And when he'd done so, I moved my towel, which made it kind of bunchy, but the towel and I were both still dry, so bunchiness was fine. "There," I said, and Vivian set his own towel down next to me, stretched it out as far as possible, and sat down where he could. I was very impressed with Vivian and Chris L. for going along with me, although I was unsure what I had been trying to demonstrate. "And that's the towel game," I said, and refolded my legs. Vivian passed a burger to Chris L. over my body, causing just a drop of mayo to fall beside my chest. And in that scene from The Adversary, we have, as I said, met a bunch of the characters who are going to be bedeviling and sorceling and generally causing problems for the narrator and vice versa across the rest of the book.